It has been called the greatest political scandal of our time. A drama that began with burglars caught in the Watergate headquarters of the Democratic Party and ended with the collapse of Richard Nixon's presidency.
It was not about a break-in. It was about a criminal conspiracy to undermine the Constitution of the United States by the President of the United States.
Today, politicians and the press toss around terms made famous by Watergate, like Stonewall and cover-up and smoking gun.
Woodward, Bernstein, you're both on.
But what most Americans remember is the Hollywood version of the story. The real-life version was much more threatening.
The people around Nixon lied comfortably, and whenever cornered, there was no hesitation in lying and repeating lies, and not caring about what they repeated was true or false.
Richard Nixon wanted Americans to think of Watergate as nothing more than a third-rate burglary. But 30 summers ago, PBS televised the Senate investigation in prime time, and Americans saw for themselves the extent of the White House crimes.
And Watergate was just not a usual scandal. It was a period in our time when we became very close to losing our democracy.
If the president could authorize a covert break-in, and you don't know exactly where that power would be limited, you don't think it could include murder?
Oh, I don't know where the line is, Senator.
In any White House, the direction comes right from the top. If the president has a fire in the fireplace, everybody else in the White House has fires in the fireplace. It really sets the mood of the entire administration.
In the end, Nixon's mendacity would be exposed in his own words, because the president had taped it all.
We're up against an enemy, a conspiracy. They're using any means. We are going to use any means. Is that clear?
The central question at this point is simply put, what did the president know, and when did he know it?
For 3 decades, that question has lingered. Tonight, one former White House aide, for the first time, provides his surprising answer.
But I could hear enough to know that Nixon was saying, we want Liddy to break into the Watergate.
Tonight, the men who were there tell the story like it's never been told before. In Watergate Plus 30, Shadow of History. It began in the dead of night with a series of improbable twists. A door lock taped open, a sharp-eyed security guard, a radioed warning that went unheard. And then, at 2 a.m., a long-haired undercover cop blinking in surprise as his flashlight trained on 5 burglars in business suits. They had been caught in the headquarters of the National Democratic Party in the Watergate Hotel and Office Complex in Washington, D.C.
I thought right away that, yes, we must have had something to do with that.
Alexander Butterfield, a retired Air Force colonel, was deputy assistant to President Richard Nixon.
Who would break into the Democratic National Committee headquarters? We would.
Well, I thought we were in serious trouble. I mean, I thought the end was possibly near, that we had gone beyond the bounds of what we should have ethically and legally.
Jeb Stuart Magruder was second in command at the committee to re-elect the president.
And now we were caught in this hell of a trap. Probably it was not going to end up well.
I guess the thing that struck me at the time is that it was so obvious to me that there was a connection, that everybody headed for cover.
Hugh Sloan was 32 years old. He was treasurer of the committee to re-elect.
You know, you could tell just from the attitudes around the campaign headquarters that there was a problem and people were running around in activities more frenetic than usual. But you really couldn't get a straight answer out of anybody. My first reaction is that everybody around me is in a whole heap of trouble, and I can help myself by helping them.
John Dean had been named the top White House lawyer in July 1970 when he was 31 years old.
I'm just dealing with the practical problems of personalities and, how are we going to get Richard Nixon reelected at this point? And how are we going to keep this from falling apart so it doesn't become a political disaster? And I'm sort of the glue, if you will, and I know this isn't going to hurt my career by doing it.
January 20th, 1969, 3.5 years before the Watergate break-in. Richard Nixon was sworn in as the 37th President of the United States. He took the helm of a country divided. 200 Americans had been dying every week in the war in Vietnam. It was a war he had inherited and one he had promised to end.
The country was split wide open. There had been massive demonstrations before we took office.
When Bud Krogh was named staff assistant to the president, he was 29.
There was a demonstration on the inauguration day along the parade route from Capitol Hill to the White House. I can't think of a day when there wasn't some kind of demonstration going on in front of the White House, around the country, in opposition to the war.
Richard Nixon had spent 22 turbulent years in political life, every moment shaped by the Cold War.
There was not a doubt in anyone's mind that he was wonderfully well qualified, had more credentials than most candidates ever will have. He's a congressman. He's a senator. He's vice president for 8 years, superbly qualified. And he'd been in politics. He was an attorney, had a nice record. He wasn't a crook then. So what are you going to do?
Nixon had this marvelous architectural mind about how he thought the world should be. Herb Klein, once his press secretary, had said that Nixon could see a cloud there, feel a drop of rain here, and say there'll be a flood in the Mideast in 3 months.
Richard Reeves, now the author of a book on Nixon in the White House, was then a reporter for the New York Times.
Well, the only guy who could really talk to that about was with Kissinger, and he did. I mean, they would kind of toss nations around like jugglers. That's what he wanted to do as president. The rest of it, as he once said in private, is I didn't come here to build outhouses in Peoria.
With his national security advisor, Henry Kissinger, Nixon wanted to make great world-changing decisions. He would open the door to China and achieve détente with the Soviet Union. But he would do it secretly, without the advice or interference of the Congress. The war in Vietnam complicated Nixon's pursuit of his far-reaching agenda. So did the growing protests against it.
You've circled the White House with buses. We had military personnel inside the White House itself. We were prepared to use tear gas if necessary. I think many people felt that it was a very dangerous time. And it was sort of the sense that there were people that were definitely trying to bring down the administration or to attack the president's policies.
Yeah, we were in a fortification. You couldn't come in or get out easily. We were in there, and they were chanting unmentionable things out there. That was amazing, too, the things that the young people were chanting. Maybe today no one would notice. In those days we noticed. Sometimes bringing something over to him, he'd say, sit down, and we'd chat. And I saw him puzzled. He was truly puzzled, as many of us were. What is it about these young people? What don't they understand? Don't they know we're doing everything we can, that this is a proper mission? There is such a thing as a domino theory. Everyone believed in that now. We poo-poo it, but if one small nation falls, it's all the easier for another to fall to communism. So we're over there to help these people bolster themselves and fend off the North Vietnamese. He thought it was a noble thing to be doing. I mean, truly thought.